So in this video, we are going to continue our look at the Civil War. We're going to focus a little bit on the draft riots um, and the 54th Massachusetts and kind of the interplay between the draft riots, the Emancipation Proclamation, the recruiting of African American soldiers, and how all of these kind of intertwine a bit. So this is primarily taking place kind of Emancipation Proclamation is presented to the world in late 1862. It's issued on January 1st, 1863. Um, and then later in 1863, in March of 1863, Abraham Lincoln issues a draft, which ultimately leads to riots in New York City. Um, and so a draft is where you are telling certain people you have to serve. You do not have the choice to not serve in the military. It's called conscription. Conscription is the other word for that. So in 1863, throughout 1862 and earlier in 1863, fewer and fewer people are volunteering to fight in this war. The stories of the bloody battles and just the horrors of the war, the length of the war. There's just not been a continual volunteering. Some people are continuing to volunteer, but not nearly enough to fight this war. And so Lincoln issues a draft. And when he does this, you have one of the things you can do is you can pay $300 to get out of the draft. In other words, the United States also needs money to fight the war. And so if you can afford to pay $300 and get out, then you can do that. Well, of course, those that can't afford it are the poorest. And in particular, in New York City, there's a large immigrant population, many of them not having even been there very long. The Irish, in particular, are in New York, and they are very upset by this conscription order, and they feel like it's unfair. They are afraid that if the United States, ends up freeing the slaves, then the slaves are going to come up to the north as well and take away the few jobs that they do have. And so there is no love loss. There is no love between the Irish and the African Americans in New York City, and the possibility of more African Americans at this time. There's actually a lot of hatred, and as a result of this draft order, riots end up taking place, and parts of the city are burned, and protest over 100, I think it's over 120 African Americans are killed during this time. An African American orphanage in the city is burned down, and there is this riot that takes place for a week, and it is very much racially motivated, and it is against the draft. So it's both racially motivated and against the draft. And so this is what happens when a draft is instated. Not universally, but in this case, at this time, in this place, this is what happens. So this kind of goes hand in hand, though. If you'll remember, the Emancipation Proclamation also, part of what it issues and does is say that we will now begin recruiting African American soldiers for African American regiments. The most famous of those regiments is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. Now there are many others, but kind of like this says, that because of the valor of the men of the 54th Regiment, the more and more African Americans begin to be recruited, and many obviously are sign up because we've got over 200,000 African American men sign up to fight in this war, which is roughly 10% of all American soldiers that fought in the U.S. Army during the Civil War. The bravery of these men, their actions, particularly at the battle of they're trying to take Fort Wagner, encourages the leadership to say, no, we need to recruit more. William Carney, the man pictured here, he receives the Medal of Honor. He's the first African American to receive the Medal of Honor. And now it's done much later. It's not done right after the battle or anything like that. It's like 37 years after the fact. But he receives the Medal of Honor for his bravery during this time. The person carrying the banner, the colors, was shot and falls, and he rushes up and grabs the banner and brings along the rest of the soldiers to continue the attack. Ultimately, Fort Wagner is not taken, but the heroics of the 54th Massachusetts, as I said, encourages the United States to continue taking advantage of these men that were prepared to fight for the United States of America. But as this says, they also didn't just fight for the freedom of the slave. They were also even fighting for equal pay and fighting against discrimination by the U.S. government. There's a movie that has been made famous about the 54th Massachusetts. Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman both star in it, and it's called Glory. And so it is rated R, so you certainly do make sure you have permission to watch it if you do. But it talks about the 54th Massachusetts and their struggle as African Americans in the United States Army.